third graders. It is time for Door in the Wall, and look, I have Stella here. You can barely see her head. So I'm gonna show you her. Oh, there she is. There she is, she's gonna read with us. Okay, she's nudging me. She wants me to pet her. So, let's continue with where we, oh, now she's leaving. Okay, goodbye, Stella. What, you don't wanna listen? Come on, let's listen. Come on, jump up here so that everyone can see you. Can you jump up? Jump up. Come here. Oh, she's got her head on my lap. Oh, there you see her nose. Okay, here we go. We left off with, oh, they're at the castle, Sir Peter's castle, and the castle is getting attacked by the Welsh. All right, because of all the fog, and because so many of the English soldiers and knights are gone, they're away, they're over on the other side of the sea, they're fighting the Scottish. And so many of them are gone, and they don't have knights there to protect them, so it's becoming quite dangerous. Okay. The fog held for days. The Welsh could not get beyond the outer wall of the castle, and the English inside could not tell what strength the enemy possessed. They might be encamped on the surrounding hills, or they might be only a small company. Several of the guards on the wall had been injured, and sometimes the yeomen could tell that an arrow had struck home in the enemy's camp. Most of the time, there was only watchful waiting on both sides. The Welsh had a machine for catapulting stones, most of which thudded harmlessly into the courtyard. Sometimes one struck the inner wall, but most of them fell short, dropping into the moat. Inside the keep, women occupied themselves with spinning, weaving, and embroidery. It helped the time to pass more quickly. The children played with toy soldiers and blocks, with hobby horses and with dolls. Sometimes Robin told them tales or sang songs, but he spent most of the time in the chamber where he slept working on the Saxon harp. Remember, he's making that harp. He made that harp. William Wise had set up a workbench for him and had finished the tool of hardened iron. There was a small lathe for turning the keys and a vise all around so that Robin could sit on a stool to reach them. The tool for making the holes was sharp so that the part was not difficult. Just as John Go-on-the-Wind had said, it was harder to turn the keys on the lathe so they would fit exactly. They were either too large and would not go in, or when they had been turned smaller, they were too small and would not hold the strings in tune. Remember, these are some tools that he's using to make this harp. And it's difficult. Can you imagine making a harp, making any kind of a musical instrument? But Robin was learning, what do you think he was learning as he was making this? Yes, he was learning patience. He had found out that the harder it was to do something, the more comfortable he felt after he had done it. Sir Peter had stood all of one night on the bastion, which is like a place of protection in the castle where he could look out. So Sir Peter had stood all of one night on this bastion, directing and encouraging the men. They had managed to drive off a raiding party that was trying to scale the wall. Now he was in bed with a chill, and Lady Constance waited upon him. The food in the larder dwindled. The larder is a room where they kept food. It's a cool place. You know, we have we have refrigerators now, and they used to be called ice boxes, and those things keep things cold. These were rooms that were kind of like low, down in the ground type rooms a place where they could keep things cool. But the food in the larder dwindled, and there were many people to be fed. Besides the garrison, which were the troops, and the household, there were the yeomen from the town and those who had sought refuge when the portcullis was raised. So remember, when they knew they were being attacked by the Welsh, so many of the townspeople ran in through the gate, the portcullis, with the yeomen, the servants that were outside of it. So there was lots of people to feed now. Usually there was a good supply of salt fish kept in barrels, but fish had not been plentiful the past summer, so now the supply was meager. There was mutton, which is sheep, to be sure, but it was all on 4 legs and scattered over the downs beyond the castle and town. So there was lots of sheep that they could eat, mutton, but they would have to risk going down there with all the Welsh around trying to get in. I lost my place. The winter kill had not taken place because they waited for freezing weather. They're still talking about the sheep. There was flour to last for a short time, but the yearly portion from the peasants' holdings was to have been brought to the castle the following week. Besides, there had been a small crop of grain because of the summer's drought. Then the water began to fail. As Robin came into the hall at supper time, he passed the table where the retainers sat. Dennis leaned to whisper in the ear of Adam the yeoman. There's scarce a foot of water in the well, he whispered. Just now as I drew it to fill this ewer, the cook told me. How came this? Asked Adam. 'Tis known that this is a good well. Tell not her ladyship, and send the word around that water must be used sparingly, or it will not last the week out, even for drinking. He thought for a moment, then said, someone must go for help, or we shall be forced to surrender the castle. It might be that Sir Hugh Fitzhugh would come to our aid, for he too is in danger from the Welsh if they break our defense. But whom shall we spare? All are needed at their posts. Let me go, said Robin. I can go out the small door at the north while it is early morning. No one will suspect me. They will think I am a poor shepherd. I shall borrow a smock from William the farrier's son, and if I am seen, I shall appear stupid. We shall keep it secret, for if Sir Peter were to find out my plan, he would forbid me to go, not knowing how strong I am. But thou art only a lad, Adam objected, and art cumbered with crutches as well, and how wilt thou cross the river? The bridge is well guarded at both ends. I shall go well, never fear, Robin assured them confidently. I have it all in my head how it shall be done. I shall find John Go in the Wind at his mother's cottage in Tripe Heath village. John shall set forth from there for Sir Hugh and his men. Now let us plan. First, I want you, Dennis, to bring me the smock and some rags to wrap around my legs. Then, see you, find me a hood that is worn and faded. Besides, I shall need long leather thongs to tie the crutches to my back, for I shall swim the river. Are you not afraid of the soldiers? Queried Dennis anxiously. Will you not fall down the steep bank? It is a far distance to the bottom of the ravine, and he stopped suddenly because one of the maids appeared. See to it, said Robin with a quick nod. That evening, there was no gathering about the fire. Everyone was restless. The hounds were still uneasy, walking about, cocking their ears at the least sound. Lady Constance took one of her women to examine the stores. Robin was afraid she would discover how low the water was in the well. Instead, she seemed confident that there was sufficient. How fortunate we are that there is plenty of water, she said. Sir Peter says that our well has never failed. Dennis looked at Robin, knowing that he shared the secret. Robin put on his warmest undertunic and carefully put away the little harp and all the parts and tools so that they would be safe. He looked at it regretfully, hating to leave it. Then, when all was ready except changing his clothes, he sought out Brother Luke, for he knew that the friar would give him help and encouragement. Dressed in the patched and ragged smock, his legs wound about with bits of rag to hold the ill-fitting hosen, Robin tried to sleep away the early part of the night, but excitement kept him wakeful. Even when he dozed, he was aware of what he was about to do. He counted over all the things he must remember. He must go softly with the crutches. He must remember the leather thongs. As Brother Luke had told him, he mustn't forget oil for the rusty lock of the door in the wall. He must keep Dieath quiet. Just before dawn, Brother Luke touched him. "Come, my son," he whispered. "We shall say the office," that's the prayer, "before it is time to set forth on thy mission." When the prayers were finished, Robin pulled on the faded hood, tucked the leather thong inside it, and followed the friar. Dieath rose from sleep to follow after, but Robin touched his head and whispered a command for him to stop. "Dieath, you stay here," he said, wishing very much that the dog could go with him. They went down a half flight of stairs and across the hall of the keep to the winding stair, making their way quietly among the sleeping servants. They went very slowly, for Robin's crutches tapped an alarm when he made haste, and the least misstep would have sent him clattering down. There was still fog when they came into the open, but it had begun to drift, and there was a gray dawn just beginning to break. "Who goes there?" demanded the sentry at the door, but seeing Robin and the friar, he allowed them to pass, thinking that they were bent on some holy errand. Robin shuddered. "Are you afraid, my son?" asked the friar. "Not truly," answered Robin, "though it's weird in the fog." "Aye, 'tis an eerie feeling to be out in the cheerless dawn, not knowing at what moment an enemy may appear out of the fog," agreed Brother Luke. And at that moment a face did appear, but it was only one of the guards, who thought the two were on their way to the chapel. They reached the sally-port in the north wall without meeting anyone else. Brother Luke dripped oil onto the lock before trying to open the door. Robin listened. "Hark," he whispered. "I hear the Welsh sentry outside. We can count the paces and can tell how far away he is." 1, 2, 3, 4. They counted 40 paces. "Now!" Slowly the door opened and Robin slipped outside. "Benedicti," whispered the friar in blessing, and closed the door. Quickly, Robin moved away from the door and the wall. In a moment, he was at the edge of the deep ravine. He could hear the river far below, but he could not see it because of the fog. Now began the dangerous descent. Carefully, Robin tested each clod of dirt, each bit of stone, before trusting his weight to the crutches, praying the while that the fog would hold. Sometimes he slid on his haunches. Sometimes seedling trees held him till he was able to find sure footing. "If I should start a stone rolling," he thought, "the whole Welsh army would be upon my neck." It seemed hours to Robin that he was sliding, groping, laboring down the treacherous cliff, but it was only a few moments, for the light of morning had scarcely changed when he reached the bottom and found himself at the edge of the river. He stopped only long enough to fasten the crutches onto his back and to wind his hood into a kind of hat that perched on top of his head. Then he plunged into the icy water, not allowing himself to consider whether he had the courage to do it. When first the water closed over him, Robin thought he could not bear it. The crutches were awkward, his chest felt tightly squeezed, and as if sharp knives pierced him. He seemed unable to breathe, and his head felt ready to burst. But he struck out fiercely, and after a few strokes began to breathe more easily. Warmth crept through his body, and a feeling of power, as if nothing could be too difficult for him. He swam strongly across the swift current toward the path he had seen from the top of the tower. What if the enemy should be camped on the other side? Suppose they wouldn't believe he was the poor shepherd he pretended to be. Suppose he found it impossible to get up the bank on the other side. Anyone could not do it, he said to himself stubbornly, and thrashed his arms more fiercely. At last, he felt the stones of shallower water under his feet. The bank appeared mistily green, and he was able to hold himself steady with one hand while he untied the crutches and set them under his armpits. The bank was not very steep after all, and in a moment he was at the top, ready to go on. His teeth chattered in the rising wind. His feet felt as if they had been frozen. His hands were so numb with cold he could hardly hold the crutches to steady them as he walked. He paused long enough to let down the hood into its proper shape. The warm wool felt good, although it was wet along the edges. Then he looked about for signs of the path. The fog was lifting somewhat with the wind, and Robin, looking back once, caught sight of the castle he had left behind. Okay, we're going to finish this chapter tomorrow, so stay tuned for the next part. All right, thanks for listening.